My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hello there and welcome back to another exciting episode of This Song Is Yours. I'm Simon Fink, your host and guide through the musical landscape of 2024, and today we're thrilled to have two legendary figures on the podcast. It's Carrie Brownstein and Corin Tucker from Sleater-Kinney. Hailing from the vibrant music scene of Olympia, Washington, these trailblazing musicians have been shaking up the industry with their feminist anthems and progressive lyrics for over 3 decades. With their punk, alternative and indie rock sound, Sleater-Kinney have become synonymous with raw energy and uncompromising authenticity. Now, their latest offering, the critically acclaimed 11th record, titled Little Rope, is a testament to their enduring relevance and artistry, and it explores themes of pain, grief and resilience, and is an absolute masterclass in urgency. Now, in today's episode, we have the pleasure of chatting with both Carrie and Corin about the creation of Little Rope and the inspiration behind some of its standout tracks. We're also going to delve into the band's origins and how their time in Australia influenced their original sound. We'll also be discussing their freshly announced Australian tour, where we'll be seeing Sleater-Kinney grace our stages in May. As always, you can find details of where to purchase the record and tickets to their tour in today's show notes. We also want to give a big shout out to Lavelle for her invaluable assistance with today's episode. Before we dive into this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to This Song Is Yours on your preferred podcast platform. It does always help, so please, thank you for doing that. Again, all details are in today's show notes. So let's not waste any more of your time. Here is our conversation with Sleater-Kinney. Please welcome to This Song Is Yours, Carrie Brownstein and Corin Tucker from Sleater-Kinney. Ladies, hello, how are we?
Great. Good, thanks. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm extremely excited to have you on the podcast as there's a brand new Sleater-Kinney record that's out at the moment. It's been out for a few weeks. Firstly, congratulations on this record.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Of course. It is the 11th in the catalogue for the band. And I'm kind of curious to begin with. I know that through all the iterations of the band, I know that we've gone through a hiatus, we've gone through band member lineup changes. Does releasing an album still feel the same each time you kind of go through it? Is there still nerves involved with it for either of you, or is it just kind of old hat at the moment where it's a process that you know and maybe love, maybe don't so much love?
I don't think there's anything old hat about it. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking to put material out into the world. You know, we're different. The world is different. You don't know where you're meeting people at, emotionally. I think if you care about something, then of course you're going to feel a little bit vulnerable putting it out there. So yeah, there's nothing that just feels like a ho-hum or sigh or anything like that.
I can very much appreciate that. With this record especially, I feel like this is it is a stunning record, and I won't keep harping on about it. You've done a fantastic job with it. This is one of the most personal and kind of close to the chest, I want to say, Sleater-Kinney records. How did this kind of process start of sitting down to write this record?
Well, I think we started writing at the end of 2021, coming off of tour for the Path of Wellness. And, we actually wrote, I think, Untidy Creature and Needlessly Wild as some of the first songs for the album. And they were very, I guess, full on would be one way of describing them, but I don't think we knew for a while, just how personal and how intense this record was going to end up being. We just knew we wanted to work. We wanted it to be focused. We wanted it to reach people. We were coming out of the pandemic where we couldn't tour for a long time. We couldn't see people. And I think we really wanted to turn the page on that with these songs, but it became the album became its own journey, definitely.
I think I also push back slightly on it being the most personal Sleater-Kinney record. I think I listened to something like Dig Me Out or The Hot Rock or The Woods or One Beat, and I just think, oh, those are really personal records. I think Grief is interesting because people see it as this almost like taboo, like subject matter, even though it is literally the most common thing. Like it's actually the only thing that we can all, that we have in common is that we will all die and people we love will die. So it's interesting to me as the person that went through, a loss in conjunction with this record. Yes, it's personal, but, we've always been a band that has grappled with, emotional subject matter and given ourselves license to vacillate between rage and joy on an album. And we've put forth many unvarnished and raw, songs over the years. And I guess there might be sort of a cohesive tragedy that befell this record, but to me, it's part of a lineage with Sleater-Kinney where we do just kind of lay it all on the line. Those tend to be the records people relate to the most.
100%. And I very much appreciate the pushback. You're probably right in terms of that previous records are quite personal as well. This one, as you mentioned, there was a situation that we don't really have to get into if you don't want to, Carrie. I know you've spoken about it throughout a lot of press for this record, so I won't make you kind of go through it again. But with that in mind, when there is something that does cause something like a loss or grief, was there ever any point where either of you kind of look at putting the record on hold or taking that time away from it to process in a different way? Or was it that this record, Little Rope, kind of helped with that process of kind of being able to move forward and process, I guess, those feelings?
There definitely wasn't any pressure to finish the album. I think Corin would have understood, there was no external pressure, but the band and the writing of the music, the songs themselves became something that I could tend to and care for. And also just most simply that I could work on. Like just it gave me an activity when I felt very useless and shapeless and completely destabilized. The fulcrum that is Sleater-Kinney is one that has existed for most of my adult life. And that is something that I know. There's a familiarity to it, a shape to it that I find comfort in. But grief was very new. And so it was not easy, but it was there was something ritualistic about returning to the band. And so we just kept writing. But there wasn't, no one was sort of forcing that, but it just became a choreography that was comfortable and comforting.
100%. Well, with this record, the sonics on this record are some of the most kind of ferocious, I feel like Sleater-Kinney has been in a little while as well. I know that you worked with John Congleton for this record, and to my understanding is that there was I want to say a mantra or like a bit of a discussion beforehand where you wanted to go in and make this record not, and please correct me if I've got this wrong, I think the word was gross. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, I would say that was our favorite adjective. And I think, to sort of clarify that a little bit, is that we wanted it to match.
It took a lifetime to find the person you want to marry. Finding the perfect engagement ring is a lot easier. At BlueNile.com, you can find or design the ring you've always dreamed of with help from Blue Nile's jewelry experts who are on hand 24/7 to answer questions. And the ease and convenience of shopping online. For a limited time, get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more with code LISTEN at BlueNile.com. That's $50 off with code LISTEN at BlueNile.com.
We all belong outside. We're drawn to nature, whether it's the recorded sounds of the ocean we doze off to, or the succulents that adorn our homes. Nature makes all of our lives, well, better. Despite all this, we often go about our busy lives removed from it. But the outdoors is closer than we realize. With All Trails, you can discover trails nearby and explore confidently. With offline maps and on-trail navigation, download the free app today and make the most of your summer with All Trails.
The intensity of our feelings. So frustration, anger, sorrow, like those feelings are uncomfortable. And I think, by experimenting with tones that were dark, distorted, that had a lot of texture to them. Because I think that the main thing I feel like that the distortion does is that gives the guitar a texture. It gives it a layer, and it also destabilizes it, especially on my guitar. It makes just like sort of a regular chord something that is there and it's not quite there. And I felt like all of that gave us texture and layers to tell the story that we wanted to tell with it.
100%. Was there ever a point where it got too uncomfortable, too gross, if you will, where the sound's like, oh no, that's probably, we've pushed the envelope too far?
I don't think so. Something that John Congleton, I think, subscribes to, and also Dave Fridman, the producer for The Woods, is you don't want to do something halfway. That sort of middle ground really doesn't show up on an album. If you're sort of aiming for some vague middle, you're starting to veer towards mediocre, just this, it's kind of a nothingness. And even something that sounds really distorted and blown out and grotesque in the moment, you listen to it 2 times and you don't hear it anymore. In order to really impact the listener, you have to make choices. But I think the other thing we did was contrast some of that growl and some of those guttural sounds with things that were very harmonious, with melody. The vocal melodies are quite catchy on a lot of the songs. There are, synthesizers that help counter some of the, more, darker, thornier tones. So we weren't interested in pummeling the listener or in destroying, sort of, self-immolating, like sonically. I think we just wanted to create a world and have there be contrast and oppositional forces in there. So for every song that had distortion, we would maybe match that or, counter that with something that was more dulcet, mellifluous, tone-wise. And, but Sleater-Kinney is just, we're not a band. We're not like a pretty songs band. That's not necessarily what we're known for. We can do that, but I think our strength lies in conjuring a little bit more of the messiness and the discomfort. I wouldn't listen to Sleater-Kinney for, like a nap.
I can very much probably agree with that it's probably not good advice to try and nap to Sleater-Kinney. I feel like the song that maybe encapsulated all of that messiness and uncomfortableness, but the harmonious kind of bits that you mentioned as well, was my favorite track on the record. It was Small Finds. It's about halfway through the record. And I feel like that it kind of jumps from like the verse to the chorus in terms of Corin, you're singing, and like I want to say almost like howling in the chorus. It's an incredible song. I was wondering if you're able to kind of take us through the inspiration or the creation of that song.
Yeah, I mean, that song came out of like a guitar jam that Carrie and I were doing in the same room that was like this spiky thing that she was doing that I really liked and wanted to make into a song. And it's one of those things where it was definitely a maybe song for the album. It was like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know. You know, like the idea of doing something halfway, I could tell that song was going to get taken down if the vocals weren't 110%. And so I really tried to throw my voice into these really compelling sounds and characters, you know. And so I was playing with those ideas and trying to come up with a story to tell with the different vocal sounds. And this idea of sort of turning inward to find joy, you know, because so much of the record is dark and talking about the big things that we go through, especially at this age. And I think that one thing that is really nice is being able to see, you know, joy in our relationships with people, but also our animals and our dogs. And so I tried to turn that inside out and looked at it from the point of being a dog, someone that really resonates with just the small joys in life. And then I did try to make it as gross as possible to fit the album. So
yeah, I just want to shout out to Corin's vocals on that album. It's one of my favorite vocal performances because between the verse, chorus, and then the coda, which, you know, the song structurally is quite odd. You know, you have this verse, chorus, and then just this long sort of third section. And each part has such distinct vocal styles. It's amazing to me that that's all one singer. And I feel like that is something that Corin would not have been able to do on our earlier records. You know, she really has a lot of control over her voice now in a way that's very exciting to write for that.
It is an incredible performance in that track and across the whole record. Thank you for allowing me to kind of ask about that and sharing that insight with me. I would love to know, and it might be a little bit obvious, there has been quite a few tour dates announced, I think, across the US and across in Europe and London, the UK. Can we maybe expect to see Sleater-Kinney down here in Australia, maybe at some point this year or next year?
You know what? The answer to that is yes. And we'll actually be coming to Australia before Europe and the UK. So look for some tour dates in May.
Oh, that is very exciting to hear. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. I know that the band has had a little bit of, a bit of a history with Australia, not just that you've toured here before. I think there was a trip to Australia after graduation right at the start of the band. I know that you've worked with the lovely Robert Forster from the Go-Betweens, who we've had on this podcast. Are there any kind of key memories that kind of jump to mind from previous Australian tours when you think back on visiting us down here in Australia?
So many good memories. I mean, I think that initial time that we spent in Sydney and Melbourne was really such an important time for the band, for us to just try a bunch of different things in songwriting. I mean, we wrote our first record in Australia. We went to Adelaide and literally lived above a bar for a week.
We're based in Adelaide. What bar?
I'd have to look it up. But our first tour in Australia, so we had an Australian drummer, Laura McFarlane. She's from Perth, but was living in Melbourne. And we were so broke that the only way we could get from one city, one venue to another was to take a bus. Mm-hmm. And so we would, and as all Australians know, but perhaps Americans or people outside Australia don't know, these cities are far apart. It's preferable to fly. So these buses they're like 10 to 12 hour bus rides. And then we would get to these cities, and the only way we could afford a hotel was often these small pubs we were playing. They have these kind of like rooms above the bar, above the pub where you stay, and there are bunk beds and a shared bathroom in the hallway. And, you know, it was pretty grimy. It was pretty derelict, but it was such a core memory. I mean, so Australia, yes, we have tons of great touring stories there, but it's very fundamental and foundational in the formation of Sleater-Kinney. It's where we figured out C#. That's what we tuned down to. We finally plugged in 2 tuners on the stage because we were so out of tune otherwise. And we happened to be in C#. We could have been in any other tuning. We could have been in drop D. We could have been in standard E. And we were in C# that day, So to us, Australia, you can't separate it out from who Sleater-Kinney is in terms of how we came to be. So we always look forward to going back there.
Well, we are very excited to have you back in May, and hopefully we're going to look after you in terms of that it's not going to be the pub or the hostel, that we'll make sure there's some proper accommodation for you this time.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for paying for all of our hotels. You heard it here first. Simon's footing the bill. This is a
legally binding document. Yes.
Yeah, 5-star hotel all across it, not just in Adelaide, but every city. You'll get those flights too, right?
Send me the invoice and we will sort it out.
Okay.
Very quickly, I do want to ask, we usually ask, I guess, what they're currently listening to. Is there anything at the moment that's kind of on high rotation for both of you, respectively?
I got really hooked on the Blonde Shell album. We interviewed her, and I keep listening to it more and more. So that's definitely a heavy rotation for me.
I've been in podcast mode, so I'm literally going to just open up my Spotify and see what I've listened to last. That's so weird. It's also Blonde Shell for me too. Before that, it looks like Steely Dan and Sinead O'Connor. So that's an unfiltered, off the cuff answer. No lies.
Oh, very solid choices. I very much appreciate that. Both Carrie and Corin, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. Excited to see you in Australia. Again, you let us know where you want to stay. We'll foot the bill. But thank you again for coming onto the podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
The most powerful designer drugs are the digital ones we use daily. And we get high off them. One touch, tap, like, scroll at a time. Just like tech creators want us to. Use digital without digital using you. Learn more at sync.ithra.com.